Good evening. Good evening. You know, it is always one of the great moments of the year when I get to stand up here in this gorgeous room, which I can barely see because of these lights, but I know it's a gorgeous room, and to say those words to all of you. And tonight, what a shining honor for me to stand here where earlier stood such outstanding leaders in our community, volunteers, people who just give of their time, people like Board Chair Audrey Koh, like every member of Horizon's Board of Directors, and like the co-chairs of this campaign who have been called out several times tonight, but they deserve every single one of them and more, Susan Lowenberg and Joyce Neustadt and Scott Hafter and Bill Glenn, for all of your incredible contributions. Thank you. And what a privilege it is to stand here where just moments ago stood two genuine heroes of our movement, Bishop Yvette Flunder and Senator Mark Leno. It is an extraordinary honor for Horizons to be able to recognize you and to provide you with a piece, just a little piece of the recognition that you so richly deserve. Thank you for everything that you have done. Of course, the single greatest privilege in being here is to be here with all of you. Thank you. Thank you for your presence here tonight. I am, as I am every year, I'm just happy and humbled and moved and just so grateful for your support for Horizons Foundation and for this community that every single person in this room cares about so very, very much. A year ago, many of you who were here, we gathered a year ago. And at that time, we gathered at a point of really considerable triumph. After all, we just won our epic fight for marriage equality. And while we all knew that marriage equality wasn't the whole fight, not by any means, it was this towering victory. And that glow hasn't faded. And in fact, this year we've made still more wonderful progress. And yet we gather also at a time of unusual and profound uncertainty, a time when the human stakes seem to be especially high, a time when gross inequalities in this country are shredding families and shattering dreams, when social and racial tensions run sharp, and they will only run sharper still until the gulf that is there between America's promise and America's reality for people of color, until that gulf finally closes. And though I am sure that none of you here need reminding of this, we are staring at a national election with overwhelming consequences for our country and indeed for the world. The human stakes remain especially high in our community too. Now, one might say, oh, well, thank goodness the LGBT community is not in the crosshairs of campaign rhetoric this time around, for once. But the plain and scary truth is that so many of us are. Queer refugees and immigrants, communities of color, poor people, transgender people, women, all may pay terrible prices for the choice that America may make next month. And if there were any doubt about the stakes, then just 3.5 months ago was Orlando. I remember holding on to my partner Royce in disbelief and horror that a place of such safety and community, a bar that could have been anywhere, had become a place of such unspeakable violence. When those 49 victims fell, so did any illusion that our struggle's over, that because of marriage equality or any of our other proud gains, that somehow we've made it all the way home. Now, we would not honor the victims by falling into panic or paranoia or hatreds of our own. We honor them by remembering them in their courage and their youth and their loves and their dreams. And by not taking our gains or even our lives for granted. And by dedicating ourselves to building a world that is free of both hatred and of guns. The human stakes run very high in our community right here in the Bay Area, too. Just take, for example, the 114 applications for funding that Horizons received just last month for our annual community grants process. Together, these applications, they paint this stunning portrait of our community in all of its vast diversity. And it's a portrait of passion and vision and creativity, and it's also, yes, it's very much a portrait of need, of real, immediate, basic human need in every corner of the Bay Area. Now, these nonprofits and activists, they come to Horizons Foundation looking for funding, not only because, well, everybody knows about Horizons as a source of funding, but also because to this day, foundations and corporations give less than 0.25% of their grants. Let me repeat that. Foundations and corporations give less than 0.25% of their grants to LGBT causes. So these organizations, the organizations that are right on the very front lines of our community, that are advocating for and taking care of and meeting the needs of literally thousands of our brothers and sisters every single day, they just don't have places to go to get the money that they need. So when we had a chance earlier this year to take on a major new venture to help LGBT nonprofits to raise more money, Horizons jumped at the chance. And as some of you know, earlier this year, the foundation was approached to take on something that's called Give Out Day, which is a one-time intensive online campaign to help LGBT nonprofits raise money for themselves and, of course, those whom they serve. The original sponsoring organization had rather suddenly folded. It had gone under. And the situation was such that either Horizons took this on or an event that had raised about $2 million for our community was going to disappear. Well, we said yes, and we are now the proud new home of Give Out Day. And the only reason that we were able to do so is because of your support. The generosity of Horizons supporters made it possible for us to do this. And because of that, last August 2nd, 2016, Give Out Day of this year, nearly 10,000 donors gave to 300 LGBT nonprofits all across the country, including 40 right here in the Bay Area. And at the end of the day, they have nearly $600,000 to fuel their work that they otherwise would not have had. Here is what Give Out Day did for one small and truly vital organization called Trans Lifeline. Founded just a few years ago by transgender people as a hotline for transgender people in crisis, Trans Lifeline gets more than 8,000 calls a year. It does life-saving work on a shoestring budget, and just like so many of our critical nonprofit organizations, it struggles to find the money that it needs. But with a little outreach and a little bit of technical assistance from Horizons this year, they participated in Give Out Day. At the end of the day, they wound up with more than $28,000 to fuel their work, and more than 300 new donors. Now, let me be very clear. I want to be very clear here that it's the people at Trans Lifeline that did the work here. They made Give Out Day work for them. Give Out Day is not a handout. It's an opportunity for nonprofits to raise money for the causes to which they are devoted. But I assure you also that there is a direct through line from your support for Horizons Foundation to our capacity to take on something like Give Out Day to the phenomenal success that Trans Lifeline had, and a through line all the way across to the people who we're calling that hotline tonight. Thank you. Thank you for your generosity, and thank you for helping people all across our wondrous community to help themselves. Now, this is hard to believe, but 30 years ago, I was fresh out of college. You can take that either way you want. But during that time in college, I'd actually only made it about halfway out of the closet. And so when I was done, I moved to Madison, Wisconsin to finish the job. Basically, to become all gay all the time. And judging from my standing here in front of you for this organization, I think we can declare that now a success. So you might say, why Madison, Wisconsin? Well, I was a child of the Midwest. And to me, it was pretty much like our version of Berkeley. It was the most liberal and open-minded place that I could think of, outside of this still mysterious land called California. So I moved to Madison, Wisconsin, and I wound up living there for a time at the old downtown YMCA Yes, I was a young man living at the YMCA. It was an icy December, typical of Wisconsin. But it was an icy December, and one night I walked from the Y over what really only we Midwesterners could possibly call a hill, down to a little movie theater that was screening a recently released documentary. It was a documentary that I later found out actually Horizons helped to fund. I didn't know that then, but the documentary was called The Life and Times of Harvey Milk. Now, many of you in this room, I can tell, as I expected, know of this film. If you don't know of it, when you leave here tonight, I suggest that you rent it and you watch it, or tomorrow. It is a brilliant, brilliant film. But 30 years ago, I sat in that theater and I was hypnotized by this place called San Francisco. I was transfixed by the story, not just of Harvey himself, but of what seemed this entire miraculous community. I heard him speak. I saw the rallies and the campaigns and the struggles and the crowds and the parades and, of course, the terrible assassinations. But nothing prepared me. Nothing prepared me for the scene that comes after one of Harvey's associates, one of his confidants, says that, well, nobody really knew how the community was going to respond, or even if the community was going to respond after his murder. And then the screen fills with this endless carpet of candles flickering through the darkness of Market Street, carried by thousands and thousands and thousands of us, and thousands of our friends and allies, who indeed came out in rage and in grief and in community and in love and defiance and pride. And even as I wept there in that theater, I was euphoric. I was just swept by this overwhelming emotion, by such pride, such hope, such dreams with this community. And when shortly after I came out into the glazed and shivering Wisconsin world, it was as though everything had changed. The world, it seemed, was bigger. And so just a little bit, perhaps, was I. Harvey Milk dreamed big. So have Phyllis Lyon and Del Martin and Bayard Rustin and Barbara Giddings and Laverne Cox and Mark Leno and Yvette Flunder and Kate Kendall. So did Horizon's own founders. They thought the unimaginable. They believed in the improbable. And then, together with many of you right here in this room, they went on and did what many would have called the impossible. The time for dreaming big is not over. Horizons Foundation has some big dreams. We dream of a world where our bars and our homes and our streets are indeed truly safe. A world where LGBT refugees and immigrants find safety and they find welcome. Where women control their own bodies. Where, of course, a woman can be president. Where a boy who wants to wear a dress or a girl to play with trucks, when they're out on the playground, that they find not fists but friendship. And that our elders, a world in which our elders, those who flew the rainbow flag well before most of us were able to, people who flew the rainbow flag when it took not just pride to do that, but it took uncommon courage as well, a world in which they can age and live with honor. A world in which every member of our community, and I mean every single member of our community, can live with equality, dignity, justice, and joy. I invite you here tonight to dream big with Horizons. I invite you each to think back to a moment when maybe you felt a little bit as I did coming out of that movie theater that winter night. Maybe it was your first Pride, or the first time you looked up and you saw that giant flag waving over Castro Street, or when you joined a candlelight vigil or a march or a protest. But that moment when you felt deep down inside, if even only just for a moment, the power and the beauty and the limitless possibilities of this community. For every time that you took that feeling, that you took that pride and vision, every time that you took a big dream and you turned it into action, every time that you helped to edge our freedom forward, thank you. For every time that you dared to think about what truly could be, every time you've chosen action over despair, hope over cynicism, generosity over indifference, for every time you've inspired someone else to think big, and every time that you have given and given again and again and again and again, thank you. And for joining us here tonight, finally, for joining us here tonight on this marvelous evening to celebrate, to honor, and to create our own community and our own future. For all your gifts and your kindnesses and inspirations from all of us at Horizons Foundation, thank you, thank you, thank you. From its very beginning,